Canada is a boring country where nothing interesting happens, and I think I speak for every American when I say, God, I wish that could be us. Canada is an agglomeration of diverse nations and cultures who all deeply resent each other and have nothing in common except they'd rather be there than in America. The result of this diversity is that politicians have very little room to deviate from a predetermined set of policies that won't alienate any of those special interests.
And you're absolutely right. Absolutely. We agree on that.
I find myself agreeing with you again, Mr. Singh.
Mr. Trudeau, I think we agree.
Canadians agree on most things.
Every politician agrees global warming is a serious issue and the best way to fight it is to continue to let Alberta pump as much carbon into the atmosphere as it wants. Every politician agrees they feel really bad about that whole genocide school thing, but let's not get carried away signing condolence checks. And every politician agrees the budget needs to be balanced, taxes need to be cut to reduce the cost of living, and new spending is needed on healthcare, childcare, and elder care. The result of this consensus is that every debate becomes not a contest of who has the best policies, but rather who believes the same policies with the most sincerity. You might think that this consensus would generate a more gentler, polite politics, and thankfully, you'd be wrong.
Mr. Trudeau, you are a phony and you are a fraud.
You love that line about taking Indigenous kids to court. Ms. Hall, you'll perhaps understand that I won't take lessons on caucus management from you.
It's just not true. You haven't answered a question your entire time as Prime Minister.
I do not believe that Mr. Trudeau is a real feminist.
Unfortunately, the cynicism that Mr. Singh is showing
he has great ambition. That's part of the reason we're in an election in a pandemic is his ambition.
People who want to take away
how about your misogynist, racist...
Leaders,
so
that is it.
Forward together.
We're out of time. Evan.
So let's meet our candidates. The Liberal Party is the ruling party in Canada, and its leader, Justin Trudeau's continued success in presenting an image as a polite, wholesome, nice guy is a continuing source of frustration to actual Canadians who have tons of experience with his cold, steely, Machiavellian interior. Canada is having its election now because no party has a majority in Parliament, which means if Trudeau wants to get anything done, he has to beg and horse trade with the other parties. So Trudeau called a snap election in the hope that he could use his post-COVID popularity boom to get himself a majority. This opened him up to accusations that this was a power grab, because, it was. But a power grab doesn't have to be a bad thing. If you need power to get something done, all you need to do is convince people to back your big legislative vision. The problem is, Trudeau doesn't have a big legislative vision. So every time someone asks him why he wants a new election, he just has to mumble about how the people and choice.
Yes, we do have to have an election now because the decisions we're taking as a country, the decisions we're taking about what the next months hold, what the next years and even decades hold, they're being taken now. They're being taken in the coming weeks. When this government gets back to office, we need to make big choices about how to end this pandemic and how to build a stronger future for everyone, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, but now.
So instead, his approval rating tanked. Whoops. The Conservative Party of Canada is the type of diverse, tolerant, and broad-based movement that can simultaneously run a pro-choice, pro-carbon tax moderate as its leader while simultaneously tweeting out neo-Nazi dog whistles. It's a Big Ten is what I'm saying. This election, Conservatives are so despairing in their ability to win that they just kind of decided to elect a borderline Liberal as leader and hope that everyone just forgot the rest of the party was right-wing. That leader's name? Erin O'Toole.
And I went from being that backbench person that nobody heard of. People still don't know me.
Interesting facts about Erin O'Toole include: the NDP is the party for people who think the Liberal Party has moved too much to the center in order to court votes. Not long after its founding, it started to move to the center in order to court more votes. Its leader, Jagmeet Singh, is, like Bernie Sanders, close to the perfect balance of idealism and pragmatism, and he has the highest personal favorability of any of the party leaders. This, however, will never translate into an actual electoral victory. And no, not for the reason you're thinking.
Mr. Singh, you are popular and you inspire many Canadians, but your platform...
Because even though the NDP's platform promises no new taxes on everyone except the super wealthy, everyone just thinks he's lying. Every interaction between Singh and a voter or a journalist sounds like a police interrogation where the detectives are trying to force you to confess that you're going to raise taxes.
Where is the money going to come from? How are you going to fix it?
Yeah.
Where is the money coming from?
So I think, first of all, if it's something is a priority, we see governments get it done. Like, so last year...
Where is the money coming from? Sorry to cut you off.
No.
The Green Party is the party for people who think the NDP has moved too far to the center in order to court votes. It is currently in the process of moving to the center in order to court more votes, under its new leader, Annamie Paul. But this process has been a painful one, and has sparked a civil war over what exactly the party's position on the Israel-Palestine conflict should be. A conflict which, I cannot emphasize this enough, they have zero capacity to affect the outcome of. Quebec's Nationalist Party, the Bloc Québécois, gets its votes in federal elections not so much by promoting policies than by just trying to convince French Canada that the rest of the country hates it. So the leader Yves-François Blanchet's job isn't really to try and become prime minister, and he literally can't, but instead to appear to be acting like Quebec's lawyer in a hostile courtroom.
I recognize the existence of systemic racism in June 2020. And then, what happened? It became a tool to say Quebec is this and that and racist and xenophobic and all of that.
This is a bit harder now that Canada has a Quebecer prime minister. So to try and drive a wedge between Trudeau and Quebec, the Bloc has embraced being racist.
For the past week, Fatima Ahmad has avoided taking the bus since Quebec passed what it calls a religious neutrality bill.
Even if public workers are not enforcing it, I feel like the citizens are taking actions on their own hands, and I feel like someone's going to come to rip my niqab off.
Quebec has now passed multiple laws banning religious minorities from making everyone else uncomfortable by dressing like religious minorities. They claim they're doing this in the spirit of laïcité, or secularism, like they do in France. The problem is that unlike France, Quebec has no tradition of laïcité. This is a province that had government-funded Catholic schools all the way until the late 90s. They're embracing it now to become more like France. And more importantly, because they know the opportunity to rag on Quebec while still feeling morally righteous is a bait that no Anglo-Canadian can resist. Which is ironic, because the bill doesn't actually have substantially less support outside of Quebec than it does inside of Quebec. Who says nationalism is divisive? The People's Party of Canada is the officially designated scary far-right populist party. If you think that means they're at least interesting, you'd be wrong.
After consultation, if we don't have any agreement, we must be able to use the Constitution, Section 9210, to be able to build a pipeline.
The problem is that the leader of this party, Maxime Bernier, doesn't really have his heart in the whole populism thing. Bernier is essentially the type of casually racist libertarian that is so ubiquitous in American politics, it's hard to even make a comparison. If you are white and American, you have at least 6 Maxime Berniers in your family. Until recently, he had been a mainstream conservative politician, and only decided to try out being Canada's Trump after he got passed over for leadership. In Canada, even Nazis forced themselves to get excited to vote for a pragmatic centrist. So, which of these candidates will be the next prime minister? It's Justin. Even if the Liberal Party loses a bunch of seats, they're still going to have the most seats in Parliament. And in my 2 days of research, it hasn't actually been hard to figure out why. He is the master of making the path of least resistance sound like a brave, hard-nosed decision. And that, more than anything, accounts for the Liberal Party's dominance, not the liberal media, or the first-past-the-post system, or the allure of his family dynasty. Trudeau gives people the ability to feel morally superior without actually having to cut any checks. He's selling what Canada wants: cheap grace.